Today, our scripture is that famous speech that Jesus makes known as the Beatitudes. Everyone's heard it. Blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are the peacemakers. It sounds like Jesus is looking out on a crowd and just making a list of all the people who are blessed. Blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek. And it's lovely and comforting to hear it that way. It's a prime example of Jesus being the God of love in human form. But I think there's more to it than that. In my Bible classes, I've been telling people that ancient writers like to give double and triple meanings to texts, especially spiritual writing. It's rarely only about its literal meaning. There are usually several layers of meaning, like a poem where ordinary words are used to represent something else. The Beatitudes are like that too. They appear very, very early on in Matthew's Gospel. They're in chapter 5. First couple chapters were about the nativity story, the Christmas story, the wise people who come from the east. And then Jesus gets baptized, and then he goes into the desert to be tempted by Satan. Then he comes out and he walks by the seashore and he pulls men away from their nets. People like Simon and Andrew and John. He says, "Come, follow me, I'll make you fishers of men." And then the next paragraph just says that Jesus went from town to town, speaking in synagogues and healing people. And then, boom, we have this, the Beatitudes. He hasn't actually told these disciples that he pulled away from their fishing nets and farms what they're supposed to do. They've just been hanging around with him as he's been doing all these miraculous healings. So they're no doubt impressed by this new guy, and they feel that they should follow him, but they have no idea what they're supposed to do. He's hired them without a job interview or even providing a job description. But that's about to change. The text tells us that Jesus draws the disciples away from the crowd and he goes up to a mountain. Then he sits down. Now, in the old days, before microphones, if you sat down, you weren't going to be heard very well. If you want to be heard by a crowd, you stand up and you project. He sits down. So that's our cue that this can't be a talk which is meant for all of the people, all of the crowd who've been following him. Rather, he's asked the disciples to come up and hang out with him in a secluded place up on the mountain, and he sits down to talk to them. So this is a talk for them. And the first thing he says is, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." We usually take that to mean poor people in general. But we know that, like all people, poor people often do terrible things. Murder, theft, sexual assault. Poor people aren't different from middle-class people or rich people. They do bad things. And Jesus can't give everyone who has just a little money a free pass on any sin that they might commit. That doesn't make any sense at all. But remember, Jesus isn't talking to the crowd. He's talking to his disciples. He's talking to a group of young men who have just left their fishing boats, in one case with their father in the boat, and they've just decided to follow him. He must have emanated incredible charisma. They must have sensed there was something special about this guy. But we know, and Jesus knows, that they have just accepted a job which is going to entail voluntary poverty. They're not going to be making money by fishing anymore or farming. They're going to be spending the rest of their lives living on donations and begging. Voluntary poverty. But Jesus reassures them, you won't make any money doing this, but you will get the riches of the kingdom of heaven if you become poor to follow me, to live according to my way. And of course, hundreds and hundreds of years of monks and mystics have found the same thing. Renouncing riches to follow the way of Jesus comes with its own rewards, even if you just end up living in a hovel and you don't own anything. The next line is a famous one. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. This is a line we often hear at funerals. And they're comforting words, and I think that they're totally true at one level. God has created us so that when people die who are close to us, we go through a period of mourning, but it doesn't last for the rest of our lives. And that is indeed a blessing and a comfort. But the fact is, everyone who's an adult will go through some period of mourning at some time in their lives. That's just the way life works. At minimum, your parents are going to die, or a friend, or a child even. If all those who mourn are blessed, then that means everyone, from Hitler to Mother Teresa, is blessed, because they will all experience mourning. If everyone who mourns is blessed, then we can shut down the churches, forget about praying, and everyone is blessed. So that can't be what Jesus means. Instead, it is more likely that he was giving some important spiritual advice for these disciples, which includes us, who have chosen the Christian path. By following Christ, you may well lose something. Your family may not get why you're a Christian. Your friends may not want to talk to you about it. They may find it kind of embarrassing. All over the world, in places like India and Pakistan and the Middle East, Christians are being driven from their homes and villages because they're Christians. There's a horrendous wave of Christian persecution happening in the world right now. For those Christian refugees, they have a lot to mourn over. They've had to leave everything behind. Their home, their friends, their family, the village, sometimes even the country that they grew up in. They've had to leave, and now they're living in a refugee camp somewhere, or they're living in hiding. To them, Jesus says, those of you who are mourning because you have chosen to follow me, you will be comforted. I will help you. That applies to his first disciples who had to leave their families and all that behind for a life on the road. And it applies to us, those of us who have decided to actually dig in with this Christian path and follow it in a way that isn't always popular with our immediate social circle, and may even make some of your friends, even your workmates, go, what is this? For those of us who read the Bible literally, which I hope isn't many here, the next line is a hard one. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. If we look around modern society, the people who own most of the property are rarely meek. They tend to be powerful, opinionated, and highly defensive about their property. Anything but meek. So let's consider this line less literally and as part of the job description of a disciple. These 12 men who are following Jesus, who just left their livelihoods behind and left their families behind, they have no idea what it means to follow Jesus yet. They can see that he does miracles, but they don't know what they're supposed to do. To find out, they're going to have to be learners. They're going to have to be humble. And we know, because we've read the New Testament, that what Jesus is going to teach them is that meekness is the way to be close to God. Not pride, not arrogance, meekness. I'm just a humble sinner, right? Jesus will take orders from God even to the point of getting up on a cross and being tortured to death. Pride is not the way that he is teaching. Humility and meekness are. When Christians become meek, setting pride aside, an interesting transformation happens, and you may have felt this. Meekness means realizing that you are not self-made. You can't take credit for the country you were born in. You can't take credit for the class that you were born in. You can't take credit for the mother tongue that you were raised up raised up in, if you think about many of the things which define you as a person, a lot of them were given to you. It doesn't mean you can't make something of yourself in this life. You do. But many of the things are things which you received. And as we get older, we come to recognize that. Oh, wow, I guess I got that from my dad, or I got that character trait from my mom, or isn't it lucky that I was born in North Toronto rather than in one of the much, much poorer parts of Toronto? Meekness also means realizing that we're never going to be perfect. Not even close. We make mistakes every single day, and we will continue to do so until the day of our last breath. Meekness means not taking yourself too seriously, seeing your own faults. And when you can see your own faults, you can more easily tolerate the faults of those around you. Because you realize, oh, I make 100 mistakes a day. It's not so surprising this other person made a mistake. True meekness is like a kind of second childhood, where it's easier to enjoy the simple pleasures of life since you've given up on trying to prove yourself to everyone else around you. Meek people often see the beauty all around them, in other people, in simple pleasures like coffee with a friend or just a walk in the woods, even a walk down the street. It's when you're feeling meek that it seems like the world is a place of wonders. It's a paradox, but to be meek means feeling that you are at home in the entire earth. And it's a friendly home, full of delights. The poet William Blake felt this meekness. In one of his poems, he said, "To see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour." The meek feel like they have inherited the earth, a gift they did not deserve or ask for. They don't own the earth. They've inherited it. They feel a kinship with it, at home in it, and that's a very rich inheritance indeed. When Jesus is talking to his new disciples, he knows that by following him, most of them are going to discover what meekness means. Judas never gets there, right? Judas is the one who gets angry and self-absorbed, and he can't believe that Jesus isn't just helping the poor the way he thinks it should happen, so he sells Jesus out. So it's not like it's automatic that disciples will become meek. But for the ones who do become meek and follow that path and stay on it, Jesus knows that this will bring a profound change inside of them in the ways they see other human beings and they see society. The next line is, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." When these disciples become meek, they will feel a kinship with all other people of all faiths and nationalities. They will feel a bond of humanity that goes beyond all the old rules. Those first 11 disciples will be the ones who bring the good news to the Romans and the Greeks, and they'll go even as far as India and Africa, spreading the gospel of what Jesus said. They will want to help people no matter who they are. That's quite a transformation, right? Jews who were told to have nothing to do with Gentiles, never even go into a Gentile's house. These guys are not only going to go into their houses, they're going to eat with them, even as they're eating foods which they taught, they were learnt as children were unclean. They are going to break every single rule so that they can share this good news with these strangers. And paradoxically, being meek, they will hunger and thirst for justice for these people who are suffering around them. Why did Mother Teresa spend her whole life among the poor in Calcutta? Why did Jimmy Carter, after he finished being president of the United States of America, spend so much time with a hammer in his hand building houses for the poor with Habitat for Humanity? Why have so many Christians throughout history lived a life of poverty and risked their lives to help others? They did it because once we feel that meekness, that sacred simplicity, we also feel the pain of others and we want to help. And so the second half of the Beatitudes is about how we can put our faith into action. The first line of that second half is, "Blessed are the merciful." Jesus is saying, use your position and power wisely. Show mercy. Mercy is only needed when you're dealing with people who have less power than you, right? Jesus will send the disciples out to help people who are poor and sick and spiritually lost and ignorant. And he's saying, be fair to them. Help them. Don't judge them. Jesus never does a means test for anyone who he heals. He never says, have you been good? Never asks those sorts of questions. He just says, what do you want? And they say, I want to see again. I want to hear again. I want to be well. And he says, okay, it's done. He never asks. It's not conditional. And he's taught the disciples that. Be merciful. At this church, we've been helping the poor at Roehampton Shelter. We don't ask whether they're worthy to receive our help. That never comes up. We just keep putting together welcome baskets and other things, and we send them off to the shelter. And that's how it should be. Just help. Be merciful. Blessed are those who are pure of heart. So why is that in there? How is that about doing things? That sounds like a being thing, not a doing thing. This has got to do with how time changes and ideas about who we are as human beings changes. We think that we make our decisions in our brains, right? We associate all decision making, even our emotions, all happen in the brains, and we've mapped out the brain and we figured out this part's for that, this part's for that. Back in the old days, they didn't see it that way. They didn't know. They felt that all major passionate decisions were made in the heart. The heart was the seat of your willpower. So to be pure of heart means to have a pure will. You've become meek, and you've figured out that your will is best when it's consistent with God's will, which is to be merciful and non-judgmental. So align your will, your projects and goals with what God wants. Make sure your church is helping people outside its walls, not just within its own congregation. Try to spend some of your personal spare time helping others who are different than you. Be pure of heart, Jesus says, and you will be the children of God. The next line is, blessed are the peacemakers. This one's more obvious, fortunately. But let's face it, peacemakers are only useful when they go into places where people don't want peace. The meek feel the pain of those who are being jailed and killed in Iran simply because they want justice in their country. Peacemakers act on those feelings at kitchen tables, at home, trying to solve family disputes, as well as in society and even in places of war. They want people to be at peace, to end the suffering. And that's laudable, but often unwelcome. People who start conflicts often want them to continue in your family and in the world. They may reject your peacemaking. Christ gets this, so the last two Beatitudes address the resistance which we may encounter. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, and blessed are those when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Jesus knows that when people act on the love of God, on the love that God has given them, it will not always go well. We risk being condemned. So Christ goes out of his way to say that if you follow my way, God will bless you, even if others insult you, dismiss you, even attack you. These words are in the gospel because they apply as much to us as they do to those 12 young men. We have the good fortune of living in a country where being a Christian won't get you killed. We can criticize the government, not worry about a knock at the door in the middle of the night. That's not true in many parts of the world. It's not true in Iran. We assume it will always be safe here. But ensuring that remains true is part of our job as Christians. I think those of us who follow the news worldwide realize that things which seem to be just natural consequences of progress are now no longer inevitable. These things need to be defended, not just assumed. To follow God's way, to make God's peace reign on earth in our homes, at work, and in society will take vigilance and effort. But the reward is a sense of belonging in the universe, a sense of solidarity with humankind, which means that you don't feel alone. Christ reminds us that a life spent following God's ways is beautiful and deeper in meaning than a life of simple survival. It's not a job description that will appeal to all. But for those of us who gather to hear the good news, it's a path that can make normal life more beautiful and a blessing to the world. And for that, we are truly grateful. Amen.